Right, let's get some reaction for more on the formation of Parliament and the role of Parliament in society. We're joined by Professor Gregory Davids of the University of the Western Cape. A very good evening to you, Professor Davids. Thank you so much for your time. Plans for the establishment of the country's 7th Democratic Parliament now get into full swing. I would imagine that a number of arrangements need to be made for establishing the new National Assembly. What kind of planning is needed to ensure a seamless transition, which will include boarding new members of Parliament and so forth?
Good evening to yourself and to the viewers. Yes, as the clip have indicated also earlier on, that 14 days after the election, Parliament, the first sitting of Parliament will take place, and the date will be determined by the Chief Justice. At the first sitting, firstly, all the new parliamentarians will be sworn in, and the swearing in of the parliamentarians will be presided over by the Chief Justice.
We know that.
Yes,
you're welcome to carry on. You're welcome to carry on.
Thank you. Yes, so after the parliamentarians have been sworn in, then an important aspect will be the election of the Speaker of Parliament, which in turn will then preside. The Speaker of Parliament will then, after being elected, will preside over the election of the Deputy Speaker of Parliament. Then the most important event will take place where we as citizens of South Africa are looking forward to know who's going to be the next president of the country. So the Chief Justice will also preside over the election of the president. Once the president have been elected, 5 days after the election of the president, the official swearing in of the president will take place. And then after the president have been sworn in, when the president takes office, he will then form his cabinet. It's appoint the ministers, as well as the president will be appointed by the president.
So insofar as the numbers go, Professor, we know that 18 political parties will be represented in the country's 7th Democratic Parliament. While several parties had some seats in the National Assembly during the last administration, the rest are entering the legislature for the first time. And in fact, some parties seen in the last administration didn't even make the cut this time around. What sort of expectations are there as the onboarding begins?
Yes, with the new parliamentarians, there is a formal program for the induction of the new parliamentarians to familiarize themselves with the processes of Parliament. So that process will also take place after the swearing in of the new parliamentarians. So there's a formal process that is going to unfold in that regard. So that is also covered so they will definitely be inducted.
Yeah. We know that for the first time since the end of apartheid in 1994, the once dominant ANC will now need to make a deal with other parties to form a coalition government. What kind of considerations do you think will be needed insofar as factoring in as these decisions are being made? Important during, as we've seen during this 14 days, we've seen already that there's a lot of discussions between various political parties. Today, in one of the newspapers, there were 3 various options that it seems, we're not sure if it's coming from the ANC, but there were different options presented, what type of coalition partners they're looking for. Importantly, irrespective
of the coalition partners. I think what's critical for the new administration is to improve the lived reality of our people. We've seen it before the elections. The three critical elements of poverty, inequality, and unemployment was high priorities that the people have spoken around. So the new administration coming in, they need to prioritize those three key elements through their programs. Unemployment, there's a huge youth unemployment that the country is faced with. So the programs, in my view, needs to address those aspects. Aspects of inequality, we've seen it through media highlighting the lack of service delivery, particularly amongst the poorest of the poor. And those are the things that, in my view, that the new administration ought to look at. The radical aspect is also the inclusion of citizens in programs that is going to affect the basic principle that I think the 7th administration must listen to and adhere to is, is the principle of nothing for us without us. That principle itself, it speaks to including society within decision making. Yes, we've seen it in the 6th administration. Constitutionally, there's a requirement for community participation, but it seems that that part has been lacking. Perhaps the participation was more from a top-down perspective. I'm of view that the 7th administration where any program or project is going to be decided for the community, and I'm saying decided.
I'm hoping our line will hold a little bit longer, Professor, because I mean you speak to some really imperative aspects there, because we know it's all very well for parties to secure a selected number of seats in Parliament, but the broader role and responsibilities also need to be well understood and factored in insofar as understanding how to hold parliamentarians accountable.
Yes, the aspect of accountability of Parliament, one of the ways that we have seen now with through the voting process, that is one way of ultimately holding Parliament accountable is through the voting process. Another way during the next 5 years is the role of media. We've seen it now before the elections, where media have crisscrossed this country and highlighting a certain service delivery neglect. So hence media itself will play a critical role in this regard. If media can also sustain the same approach that they have had before the election, in other words, play this fundamental role in keeping parliamentarians accountable, then as a collective we can do that. Now, within the case of citizenship, we need to critically improve as a collective citizenship. We cannot allow and hand over the responsibility to Parliament itself. Yes, we voted for these parliamentarians and we've entrusted them with responsibility. But as active citizenship, we must play a more meaningful role over the past 5 years. It can't only be that when the next election takes place, that we throw the ballot paper keeps Parliament accountable. We need to do it from day one. The moment that the President had been sworn in, the moment the Cabinet have been elected, as well as when the opening Parliament address, because the opening of Parliament address will provide the vision and the strategies of the new Parliament, and will then culminate in budget formula. from that point, as citizens, we need to be involved and be accountable.
All right, very well. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. That quality of that line not sounding so great towards the end, but thank you for your time, Professor Gregory Davids of the University of the Western Cape.